This is episode 111, everyone. Episode 111. And I'm talking about my July of 2003. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Whew. Yeah, if you've been following me for the last several weeks, you'll know that I've been talking about a grand story that I have had from 2002 till 2003. My life as a 24-year-old and a 25-year-old. Long, long story with a lot of little stories attached to it. A situation where I just couldn't tell one piece without telling all of it. And I've made reference to this every week. I believe since I've been doing this that A, I literally couldn't tell any of my story of 2002, rather 2003, without going into what happened in 2002 because a lot of the things that I did in 2002 were extraordinarily important to what happened to me in 2003. It's just the way it was. What can I tell you? Sometimes things just sort of roll into each other, and for me, that's what happened in 2002 and 2003. And I guess I really want to get this story out there for posterity's sake so that it's forever encased in the YouTube universe. That way, if even I get old and senile and forget what happened to me, I can at least go back and I have a record of what I actually did back then. I think that's almost exclusively part of the reason why I'm doing this. Not to mention the fact that I think that it's somewhat entertaining and interesting at the same time. Well, I find it interesting that today is May 24th, 2025, and I just got done watching Saturday night's main event. WWE brought it back, and my goodness, I love it. The nostalgia just makes me think back to when I was a kid, staying up on Saturday night really, really late at the time, watching Hulk Hogan wrestle Bad News Brown. I'll never forget that match. Bad News about to try to give Hogan the ghetto blaster. Hogan ducked out of the way and ended up finishing off Bad News 1, 2, 3 after the leg drop. And now here we are, years and years and years later. My favorite commentator from WWE, Jesse the Body Ventura, is back doing his thing with WWE again. And it's just a lot of fun. It really is. It's neat to see the idea of Saturday night main event coming back. It's just, I love it. This is Memorial Day weekend, and hey, I enjoyed the absolute heck out of the earlier things that I did today. Had a bunch of hot dogs. To be honest, it was 8. Not as many as I typically may have eaten, but eh, I gotta cook them, so sometimes you kind of get lazy. Huh. So I always stopped at 8. Um, let's see what else is kind of interesting at the moment. I know my U.S. belt is hanging right next to me. I brought it out because, well, it is Memorial Day weekend, so I figure that the United States Championship is the belt that I'm going to kind of walk around with throughout the house, and every once in a while I'll step outside the door because it turns out that the people around me do a lot of fireworks. And so I walked outside just a few minutes ago after Saturday night's main event ended and heard the fireworks going off and stood there with my U.S. belt over my shoulder. It was kind of neat. Would have been a really cool picture if I thought about it. Just had to take a sip of some cherry Dr. Pepper. Oh boy. do I have a story to tell you about the cherry Dr. Pepper. But as much as I'd love to tell you right now, it's part of the stockpile of stories that I'm building up for when I'm finished with 2003. So you'll just have to trust me that there's a very fun and sad to me story regarding cherry Dr. Pepper that I'm going to get into somewhere down the road. It's going to happen. But as of right now, well, hey, we're going to talk about July of 2003 and see just how far we get. I'm not trying to, I guess you could say, speed through this, obviously, since I've taken about best guess, looks like somewhere in the neighborhood of this will be the fifth episode I've done for 2003, where I did two episodes of 2002. And like I said, I didn't tell everything. I told a lot, and the amount that I did tell and have told and still will tell, it's going to make for a very interesting story at the end. But for right now, I think it's time to fill in the blanks. And the question for fill in the blanks today is, did I really walk around outside with the U.S. Championship belt? And that blank can be filled in by the answer of yes. Yes, I did. I walked around, took out some trash, had the belt on my shoulder, and like I just said, I was just outside no more than 20 minutes ago watching fireworks from my porch with the U.S. Championship belt on my shoulder. So once again, the fill in the blanks for this episode is, did I actually walk out of the house with the U.S. Championship belt? Answer, an emphatic yes. Now it's time to go into the main event. So we're going to ring the bell and start this main event. Ding ding, main event time. Main event time. All right. For all of you who are listening here on YouTube for the first time and you kind of want to know what's going on, I would strongly recommend, if you want to really get a good feel for this story, go back and listen to one, two, three, four, about six episodes before this one. Then you'll be able to get a grasp of where I'm at right now. But for those of you who have been following, I'm going to just give you a very quick, um, you know, recap of where I was last week. Now, last week, I was talking about my time after I got out of the hospital on May 8th. And then I rolled through June because I pretty much was at home trying to work on getting my energy back because the sarcoidosis, which was the disease that I was diagnosed with, which was the one that was the major problem, had the worst side effects for me personally being fatigue. And so I tried what I could in order to combat that by doing crunches. Started off by doing 10, increased it throughout the time. May I got up to maybe about a handful, maybe closer to 100. And then June, I went back to work. My friend and coworker Ann did not have much longer to work at Wawa with me. She had a situation at home that changed, and she ended up moving back to Florida. Now, in the process of her moving back to Florida, before she actually moved back, I think it was maybe another 2 weeks before she left, maybe three, I had actually gotten, well, not even, I can't say got sick. I was still sick. And the symptoms came back with a vengeance, giving me more massive fatigue. She and Steve T and um, my other coworker, um, Joan, noticed that the fatigue was back and I was a slug again. I just didn't have the energy. Went back to the doctor probably 3 weeks into June, and he put me back out. Now, this is a good place to end the recap. It's a fairly good place. I'm back out. It's the last week of June. I'm seeing the doctor, and it was Dr. Boone, my regular doctor. Turns out that whatever Dr. Kaiser was doing was not as effective or helpful to my cause. So Dr. Boone recommended the University of Penn Lung Department. They really had a specialization to deal with sarcoidosis, and they worked on how to handle it and how to handle it very, very well. And so, upon his recommendation, he gave me all the information that I needed to get in contact with the University of Penn Lung Department and to set up an appointment. Now, here comes the awful part. The appointment that I had gotten because they talked to me wasn't until September. Now, mind you, this is the last week of June, so I would have another good just about 3 months before I actually saw the people at the University of Penn. And that's the way I kind of left it, knowing that I was going to see my doctor in 2 weeks after I had set the appointment. I was going to let him know it's not until much, much later. Now, fortunately for me, I was not in the best of spirits. I was a little upset because when I realized that this thing came back and it was still trying to rob me of my energy, it kind of made me very, very angry. I got mad. Some people would think that that's a pretty good way to react to a disease which is taking your energy away, but making it that much worse is that it happened to be in my 25th year of life. So it's like, what? You're taking one of my best years and you're trying to eat it up with this nightmare disease? No, this is no good. Now, I had plenty of time to ponder. I believe I had mentioned that I went and spoke to Steve T when he was at the training center at his secondary position at Wawa, not just being a manager at my same level. He was also the site manager at the training center for Wawa when they still had training centers. And he would be there late. He would usually end up closing, taking out the trash at the end of the night, and wrapping up all the information from the new hires or people who had classes that day, be management or otherwise. And it's kind of a little bit of recap. Yeah, I went back and I talked to him while he was closing up all the things he needed to close up at the training center. And one of the things he said was to go on a roller coaster. Don't just sit there. Don't mope around. And I did. I may have mentioned it several times that my late Aunt Susan, who just passed away in this recent December 2024, had given me a season pass to Great Adventure every year from 1996 until 2007, when I really started becoming more of a Philadelphian in 2007. And I wasn't going to Great Adventure. I wasn't close enough, and it wasn't practical for me to do it anymore. And so I did go, in fact, to Great Adventure while I was sick, and I sort of wasn't sure how I was going to react to it. The speed of the rides, walking from the ground to get to the platforms in order to get to the rides, how much energy it was going to take me just to get from the car to the entrance, which even with the season pass parking was still a pretty significant length for somebody who was got an energy robbing disease. And while I was at Great Adventure, and it took me everything just to get to one ride, I would get to Batman, which was one of the farther rides out there from the entrance that I was going through. I'd get on the ride, I'd do it. I'd wait about 20 minutes to half an hour, and then I would move on to something else. And a lot of times at that time, there was a ride called Viper that was still there. And I would move on and I'd go to that. And I just was pounded to death because part of the reason why I got rid of it, because Viper was a very, very rough ride. Not only was it significant distance from the Batman ride, but boy, there was no head restraints. I'm surprised that I didn't get a concussion with the amount of times that I rode that ride. But neither here nor there. I did so and enjoyed it. And those two rides and then a walk into the park were more than I could deal with. So I went home after that and rested for the rest of the day, which turned into 3 days. But that's just the way it happened while I was doing it. I'd still do my crunches, and I'd still play video games when I felt good enough to do so. On good days, I could play. Bad days, I would play a little, and then I would be like, I just don't even have the gas to even use it. Play a video game. That's what happened. That's how bad it was. But now, that was really how June kind of ended. And in July, we're about to come up to July here, because that's what we're trying to work towards, July. Let's see. I guess we'll start with having good and bad days, which is what I did in July. And I would check in every once in a while at Wawa and see how people were doing. And during that time, my Aunt Susan and my Uncle Willie and my cousin Dan and Matt and my other two younger girl cousins, Shy and Tiffany, my Aunt Diane and my mom, they said, it'd be a good idea. Let's all go to Hershey Park. Now, granted, I was still having a tremendous amount of bad days at this point, and it was just going to be a few days. I believe we were there 2 or 3 days. It wasn't many, but it was long enough where we did have a hotel room where we stayed. Obviously, not all of us were in the same room. We had a bunch of separate rooms. Me and my boy cousins were in one room. My aunts and everybody else, they all split up. I think we took like 3 or 4 rooms. But boy, that trip, just the drive to get there, Whew, I did my best to have great conversation with my cousin Dan and Matt, who were I traveling with them. But there was times where I just was so tired that I couldn't keep myself awake. And boy, I was a wet blanket. And I know I was a wet blanket. And some part of me thinks, yeah, it probably would have been better if I didn't go. But at the same time, I hadn't seen my cousin Dan in a little while because he was at school. I can't remember which school he was at the time. 2003. He may have been at the University of Georgia by then, or did he come back? Nah, he'd already been to Delaware. I think yeah, he may have been at the University of Delaware, not Delaware, Georgia. I think he was at Georgia. But I believe he got his master's at Delaware and his doctorate at Georgia. Well, Heinz, either way, he was still in school, and I hadn't seen him in a while. So that was part of the reason why I wanted to go, because his brother Matt and me hung out a lot, even not as much as I wanted to when I got sick, but prior to and after I got sick, we still saw each other a great deal. Excuse me. The biggest thing was when we were at Hershey Park, I wanted to have a lot more fun than I did. I wanted to go on a few more rides, but boy, I know my girl cousins, they were much younger than us. 13 years younger than me and 12 years younger than me. And I was 25, so I guess they were really, really young, 12 and 13. And man, I couldn't keep up with them at all. So I had to hang with the boys, Dan and Matt, and we did a lot of walking. Boy, it was draining. It took everything for me to be able to go through the park. And we went there a couple times while we were there. But the coolest part about the day was what we did after the park. And this is the stuff that really made the trip for me. It was the part that I enjoyed the most. It was when we went to play mini golf, when we went to go bowling, just the three of us, me, Dan, and Matt, just enjoy those points. But the problem was, it was late, and I had already used up every bit of energy that I had just walking around the park. I had nothing at all left. And when I say I had nothing left, I mean I had nothing left. I wanted to try to keep myself awake, and I tried, but I was so out of energy that I literally fell asleep multiple times throughout the day. Once we had gotten back from the park at the hotel, we were getting ready to do the things like the mini golf, which we played a bunch of rounds, and then when we bowled, just was insanely tired, man. It was horribly, horribly bad, but I enjoyed the time. Now, admittedly, I really strongly thought it was a bad idea for me to go, and I didn't tell my doctor I went. Ah, cherry Dr. Pepper. I thought that as bad of an idea it may have been to go, it would have been a much worse idea had I stayed home because I'd have missed that opportunity. And to this date, that was 2003, July of 2003. That was the very first time that I had been on a vacation with my first cousins on that side. All of them, the four of them. I had been on vacation with the boys when we went to Disney World when we were younger and Busch Gardens. I had spent a lot of time with Shia and Tiffany, but never went on a vacation. So that was the first time. And here in 2025, the only time. I've never done it before. Rather, I've never done it since. So 23 years, 22 years later, still haven't done that again. That's kind of interesting. And knowing that, I definitely would have made a mistake had I not gone. As exhausted as I was, and as useless as I was, and as, like I said, a wet blanket on the trip in general that I was, I wouldn't have missed that trip for the world because of that simple fact that it was the first time we actually had that sort of vacation, and we haven't done it since. And the way life is, I don't know if that's a trip that we would be able to make again. Very interesting that I thought about that right here, right now. But now, let's go back to the house, still in July. I haven't gone back to see Dr. Boone yet, and I'm just exhausted, tired, and thinking to myself, hmm, that pancreatitis sarcoidosis combination nearly killed me, and I'm still not fully out of the woods yet. What is the worst case scenario in my mind? What is wrong mentally? What is going on in my head? What am I thinking in general? And it dawned on me. The one thing that I focused on when I was in the hospital that I didn't mention until now because I didn't focus on it until that week in July after I went to Hershey Park with my family. A very ugly four-letter word that begins with an F. Not the one you're thinking. One that's much, much worse. Fear. Fear. What was I afraid of? As a 25-year-old kid who literally looked death in the eye. What was I afraid of? Was I afraid of death? I really had to think about it. Was the fear that I could definitely have checked out, or as the kids say today, become unalive because of the pancreatitis sarcoidosis 1-2 punch? Was there something I was afraid of? Was it death? Was I afraid to die at that moment? Did I have that come to Jesus moment, as they say, and realize, hey, there are things that I'm afraid of. Now, I've mentioned it several times that I was a radio major in college, but before that, I was actually a funeral services major. And for probably several years, when I was considering getting into the funeral business, I calcified myself against the fear of death. And I mean, literally, to the point where I had come to realize this very simple fact at a very young age, 14, 15, that everybody is inevitably going to die. We're all born with that single objective that we will eventually end up dying. I definitely came to grips with that at a super young, partially because of the fact that I was really wanted to get into the funeral business, and there was multiple times where my family mentioned an uncle, Uncle Calvin, not Calvin, Clarence, who had passed away at 16 years old after being hit by a car by a drunk driver. If he could go that early, I could go that early. Anybody can go that early. I had classmates, a couple of them, one, well, actually in my class, who passed away in my junior year. Then prior to that, there was a guy who ended up committing suicide, and someone else, a younger kid, who ended up drowning in the ocean. So death comes to us all, no matter what age. I was not afraid to die. Essentially, what it came down to, what was I afraid of? Because that's the one thing that people have that just doesn't seem to go away. And that is a fear. What was my fear? And could I conquer my fear? That's my challenge at this point. Can I conquer not just whatever I'm afraid of? Can I conquer all the things that I'm afraid of? Over time, calcify myself against the one thing that stops people from doing anything: fear. And as I thought about it, I realized at the end of the day that the ultimate fear isn't of death, but it's of living. Hear me out now. Just like I said, the fear of being alive. That means doing things. There are certain things that you just won't do because you're afraid to do them. I was like, wow, this is a eureka moment. Here I am at 25. I've isolated what could be the one thing that could change my mental trajectory for the rest of my life, eliminating things that I'm afraid of. Looking at it, thinking about it, figuring out what it is that I don't like about it, and then doing it. Once you've done something that you're afraid of, you're now not afraid of it. You're in control of it. If you're afraid of any little thing, How can you stop it? Is my thought process. How can I stop it? I gotta just fight through the mental hurdles because that's where fear comes in. That's where it gets you. You're not afraid of the physical thing. And that's when you know that you're not afraid of it. When you can look at this situation and see it and be like, okay, I'm just going to do it. Whatever happens, happens. And one of the first things that I recognized right away was at that time at 25, like I said, I was a funeral major, I was a radio major, and I did not finish. And then I recognized that I didn't want to become a manager at all. And I asked myself, why did I want to? And then the thought popped in my mind, was it because I was afraid to actually not be able to do it and not be good at it? And then I was like, okay, I did it. I stepped up. I wasn't given it. I took it. I told my boss, Steve A, that I was going to pursue it. And then he said, well, why don't you do it here? So essentially, that thought of being able to fail in that instance, I had eliminated. Then, just in general, I realized that I was afraid to fail. That was a problem. It was a weakness. If you're afraid of failure, you're not going to try certain things. From that day forth, I said, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be afraid to fail. And that was a sort of a catapult moment that made me do things that from that day forward in July that I didn't necessarily want to do sometimes, but stuff I just had to do because it wasn't about not succeeding, it was about not doing it. And that limited what I could be mentally. I had to crack through that. And as I'm talking to you now, it's a good reminder of that because the thing that really set that apart was in July as I was sitting back thinking about it, I was watching a movie that I already have the movie, but I must have. I know I watched it in the theater, and instantaneously, that guy became one of my top three favorite heroes. And it wasn't because I didn't know him, I didn't understand him, didn't appreciate him. But now that my thought was going in my mind of not being afraid, now this guy has become one of my very favorite heroes. In fact, as a result of it, I named my son essentially after him because of that simple fact. And that movie that I speak of came out February 2003. And I went to the theater and I saw it, and just around that time, the symptoms were beginning to get heavy. But I wasn't really noticing it. I enjoyed the movie. Many people hated it. I still revere it. I still enjoy it. Not even for what it was. People can say what they want about how bad it was, but it's the point that a man existed, unafraid, a man without fear, daredevil. The whole idea that he has superhuman senses, touch, smell, hearing, taste, but he's blind, but his sense of hearing gives him sort of a sonar so he can still kind of see. That's not a superpower. No matter what, he may have those super heightened senses. The thing that makes Daredevil Daredevil is that he's not afraid to jump off the building. He's not afraid to do what must be done to get justice. That's his power. That's his main ability. Not having that fear. So he's not stopped by little things. He will do what needs to be done. And that was a very important thing that I needed to do mentally in order to get myself over the hump. Not be afraid. Now, when I went to go see the doctor, I didn't tell him about my trip to Hershey Park. Not out of fear. I just figured it would be kind of an Obi-Wan Kenobi truth. I didn't tell him because he didn't need to know. Why didn't he need to know? Well, he didn't need to know because I told him the truth about me doing a little bit more. But of course, it was the truth from a certain point of view. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Um, it's real safe to say that he was not happy, not with me, but with the fact that I told him that when I did get in contact with the University of Penn, that my appointment wasn't until September. He actually was very upset and actually picked up the phone right in front of me, dialed the number, and I was in the office for like an extra 10, 15 minutes because he was on hold for about 5 minutes or so, maybe 10, before he got through. And he himself spoke to the doctor that I will eventually see, which I'll speak on at this, looking at the climb. I'll speak about this doctor later. But he actually got me an appointment with the University of Penn. And instead of my September appointment, he was able to make that appointment happen in August. So I got bumped up a whole month. Now, that's really good, because when I made my appointment in late June, I was expecting to have my appointment in September, late September. But now that it was a couple weeks into July, he was able to get my appointment in early August. So he really actually made things move on a much, much faster level than I could personally. I am definitely grateful for Dr. Boone's efforts on that. He was able to accelerate my time in order to get to the appointment that was needed. And my goodness, who knows how long it would have been, how long I'd have been out had I not had to wait until September. And who knows if I would have gotten the doctor that I got to actually treat me, because it was not going to be the same doctor. He told me it was a different doctor. And that was really interesting that he was able to pull that off. And I'm really glad that he did. Glad. Now, at this point, he got me that quick doctor's appointment. My mind has totally changed as far as what I was willing to do. Remember how, well, last week's episode, when I was doing those crunches, I did 10 and then I started doing more. And I told you eventually I ended up getting to around 500 a shot and doing about nearly 2,000 a day. By like 2005, I was doing about 2,000 crunches a day. But in July, that's when I had that breakthrough. My mind was now fixed on knowing that I'm not afraid to keep doing these. I looked up my muscle and fitness magazines. I got a subscription, found a few different types of crunches, and I attacked it. Got to the point where I was doing 300 crunches in a sitting 4 times a day when I got up before breakfast, before lunch, and I would take a walk, which I have a story about that. Maybe we'll get to that. I had to do a couple hundred crunches before dinner, and I did a few hundred crunches before I went to bed. And it was when I got to the point where I was saying my mantra essentially, I will not stop. I will never stop. I was not afraid to stop. Before, I was like slightly afraid that, I don't know, do I have enough gas in the tank to do this? It didn't matter. I was just going to do it. It's like fear was not going to hold me back. If it was something I was afraid of, I was going to take it, look at it, dissect it, figure it out, destroy it, and then do it. Because in my mind, I got to a point where I still sort of am in that way. A man without fear is invincible. Think about that. If you're not afraid to do certain things, to do anything, you can't be stopped because you'll be willing to do whatever, whenever, however. Now, when it comes to flying, this is a total sidebar. It has absolutely 100% nothing to do with fear. The reason why, at 47 years old, I have never been on a plane is so petty and ridiculous that I probably should just go on a flight just to go on a flight. It's for real, seriously. The reason why I haven't been on a plane, don't foresee myself getting on one anytime in the future, is because in 2001, when the towers were attacked, they changed everything. It used to be a while to get on a plane, but it wasn't as bad as it is now. Like, now they want you to get there like 2 hours early. They want you to pretty much strip down to your underwear. They want you to do um, backflips and give them urine and blood samples. I just don't want to sit there and wait and wait and wait. And it's not about fear. It's about just pure and just absolute aggravation. I don't want to be sitting there and having to wait. It just feels dumb to me. Like, why am I waiting? Granted, I understand that you want to stop to make sure if somebody is trying to do something bad, some sort of terror or hijacking, you want to stop that before it starts. I get it. But man, the inconvenience to me, especially somebody who is not an early riser, if I wanted to catch a flight that was going to take maybe 2 hours to get to, say, of all things, if I wanted to go watch my 49ers play a home game. I want to get there early. So on like Friday or Saturday when I leave, I'd probably want to catch a 6 o'clock flight so I could adjust myself to the difference in the time zone. And if you're telling me that I have to be at the airport 2 hours early and I want to get on a plane at 6 o'clock, that means I got to be there at 4. 4 o'clock in the morning. I got to be there so I can get through all the checks and balances and all that stuff before I even put a pinky toe inside the plane. That's just too much for me. I just would rather be sleeping. Granted, you can sleep on the plane, but I gotta make sure my stuff is there. I gotta hope that they don't lose my luggage. This is stuff that you had to think about before that you had all that stuff go on in 2001. But now you gotta think about that. Plus, you gotta take your shoes off to make sure you're not carrying explosives. I mean, it's just not fear, it's a pain. And part of becoming a man without fear is really distinguishing why you don't do something. And I understand that the flight thing is absolutely unfair. I mean, it takes a while just to drive to Florida. It takes about 24 hours, 18 to 24 hours. You can fly there in like 3. I mean, how much easier is that? It'd be a lot easier, but you know, get to the airport 2 hours early, check all that stuff. Like it's just that process just makes me just nauseated. Like it shouldn't take that long, but it has to. But it shouldn't. And now you gotta have real ID, and you gotta do all that same stuff just to get the real ID. Just it's just so frustrating. Like it is. It really is. I almost want to get the time stone out so we can bring back Bin Laden, just so that the SEAL Team 6 can get him and kill him again. Just that's a terrible way to put it, but man, that's where I'm at with that. That whole flight thing, he just messed it up for me. Kills me. But I can't deal with the time that it takes to do it. It just seems just so inconvenient. And that's why I won't fly. But the fear thing, now that's such a different animal because if there's something like, I don't know, let's think, skydiving. I want to do that. Excuse me. I still think about doing it. But at this day and age, I have to ask myself, how is that going to affect my broken down body? The pressure of falling. Is that going to affect my back, my knees, my newly torn and repaired bicep? How am I going to physically feel after that? And then it becomes not a matter of fear, it becomes, is it worth it? The money that would be spent versus the pain that I may be in. God, just checks and balances. Then there's things like, well, let's think of one. I don't know, doing an art show, being part of one. Did I ever think that that would happen? Well, I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. But there was a little bit of fear that came into mind. And this is years later now in 2025. But when I recognized the fact that, well, you know what? I want to do it. So just do it. And so I did. And I'll be talking about the art show sometime in the next several weeks. But of course, one of the biggest fears that I had to fight through was the fear of having to, I guess it would have been to be unable to get my energy back. And I just kept fighting, fighting, and fighting without fear until I realized, well, you know, I can do this. And that's kind of how July went. But to make a quick story that happened in August, because really that's where we're at now. It's one of my favorite stories because I'm still a couple of, from this point in time, maybe a week or two before I get to go see the doctor. And I'm still doing my crunches. I'm still taking my medication that Dr. Boone had prescribed to me. And like I had said, I was doing a number of crunches before breakfast, before dinner, and before bed, and before lunch. But lunch was special. I would do those crunches, and on days that I felt good, which was at least somewhere in the neighborhood 3 days, sometimes four. Those are really nice. If I felt good 4 days, I would take a walk up the road about a mile, and then I'd try to stretch a little bit more every day. But there was points where I just couldn't go that far, but I still took a walk. And I was off on one of those walks one day, and as I was going up the road, now, mind you, I should probably be a little bit more specific as to when I say I would get up and I would do my crunches before I had breakfast. I had an internal body clock at this point that had me getting up around 7:30, 8 o'clock. Then I eat breakfast after I do the crunches, and then it would be around 11:45 to 12:15. I would do my number of crunches, 300 or so, and then I'd take my walk. So it's around, let's call it 12:15, and I'm off to take this walk. As I'm walking down the street, I'm going, this time I'm stretching myself a little bit, I must admit. As I'm stretching, I'm going a little bit further than that mile, probably walk 3/4 of a mile because I got to walk back. So usually I would walk half a mile down and half a mile back, and a mile. I probably walked somewhere in the neighborhood of 3/4 of a mile, and so it's going to be worth a mile and a half. And so I turn around and I'm walking back home. And as I'm walking back home, the most interesting thing happens. A friend of mine is driving his truck down the road. Now, mind you, I've been gone maybe 45 minutes. And in that time, I would usually be back about an hour, then I'd eat lunch. But this friend of mine sees me when I'm on my way back, heading towards home. Now, mind you, I'm still out there in Manchester at the time. There's really nothing around in the spot where I'm at. And he stops. Again, this is a fella that I'm going to once more change the names in order to make sure that the innocent are protected. And this gentleman we're going to call Joe. Joe saw me, and the first thing that came out of his mouth is, I know you've been sick and you haven't been at Wawa working, and now you're walking down the road. Do you need a ride home? Immediately, I had a big smile on my face, and I said, no, I'm cool. Everything's fine. And then he said, in that sense, I haven't talked to you in a while. What's going on? And then the conversation began. Now, it was a good conversation because I hadn't talked to Joe in a few months. Like, he was part of the Wawa gang, and I'd see him every day I was at work. And now that it's early August, I hadn't been back to work for the entire month of July, and I had left 3 weeks into June, so I had been gone for about 6 weeks, 7 weeks at this point, almost 2 months, and I hadn't seen him. And we really just sat there and we shot the breeze for about 2, maybe 3 hours. Like, it was a long time. Like, I mean, legitimately a long, long time. Unexpectedly, strangely long time. Like, to the point where you would think that this was so long that it was like weird long. Like, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed every second of the conversation, and I believe he did as well because we were just catching up. We were talking about all kinds of stuff. How I was feeling when I was going to see my next doctor, the doctor's appointments, how the hospital visits were going, and all that stuff. And he was telling me about his grandkid, how his son was doing, what the status that he was having because he was in a situation where he was in a car accident, a pretty bad one, and how that was playing out, how the rest of the Wawa gang was doing, how they were asking about me, and how now he's going to tell them that he saw me at this point in time. And this was like a serious, long conversation, a really long conversation. And like I said, I left the house at about 12:15, and 45 minutes of me walking, and on my way back, it would have made it around 1 o'clock. And I caught him when I was on my way back, and that would have been around 1 o'clock. And like I said, we were talking at least 2.5 to 3 hours. It was a long talk, like some seriously, seriously long talk, like 3 hours. Uh, I mean, it had to be about that long, at least, because it was long enough that he actually was on his way somewhere towards Jackson, New Jersey, which is very interesting. And we had talked for all that time, and it's like, well, I'm gonna let you go. You know how that is. And I'm like, yeah, it was good talking to you. See you again soon. And he drove off, and I continued walking home. And when I was on my way back, I saw my mom and my stepdad walking up because it had been so long since I had come back. They got a little nervous, thinking that something had happened to me because of either I ran out of energy or something hit by a car or something like that. But when they were on their way up, they had just turned to come up towards the direction where I was at. And Joe had just was literally just driving off, and he actually went past them. And then I told him, I was like, "Hey, you see that truck right there? Yeah, what about? That's Joe. Oh, I got it." Like, oh, wait a minute. You were talking to him all that time? Yeah, all that time. All that time. Just sat there and just talked to him for all that time. And the craziest part about was that spot in Manchester we were at, I had seen two cars go past me when I was on my way down, and when I was on my way back, I saw three, and one of those three was him. So I saw five cars in like 3 hours. That should tell you the traffic situation. And in the process of talking to him all that time, I said, we had a good conversation, and then I was on my way back to the house with my mom and my stepdad, and we were talking about that. And I got in the house, and it was like 4 o'clock. So it had been at least 3 hours that I was talking to him. That's how I know it was after 4 o'clock. So I had kind of missed my lunch on my schedule that I had been on. But boy, it was like 3 hour conversation, and thinking back on it, I would not have missed that conversation for the world. It was one of my favorite conversations that I ever had. And I think the best part about it was sort of a reminder that, well, people were wondering how I was doing. And in some ways, that made me think of another one of my favorite movies, Troy. The idea that Achilles did all the fighting that he did with one singular purpose in mind, was so that his name would last throughout the ages. By being out of Wawa for so long, I expected nobody to care. But it turned out that, well, there were people who did. And that's kind of neat to know, to have that kind of reminder every once in a while. Yeah, there are people who are wondering what happened to you, and they're waiting for you to get back. I thought that was kind of cool. Whew. But I think I've talked your ear off today about July and even a little bit in August, because that was in August. I think that I should probably cut this off because I'm going to have another episode, which is going to most likely talk about my trip to Philadelphia and seeing my new doctor at the University of Penn, the one who just essentially readjusted my medication and guided me through the rest of the process. I think it's very possible that this doctor, I'm not going to name yet, was very instrumental in keeping me mentally focused as well as healthy in order to move through this process as best that it could be moved. And I'm excited to talk to you about that individual, but we'll hold off on that till next time. So we're going to go write a note on that. Because now we're still going to push those other things back a little further. Oh, yeah. And I can tell you right now, this episode is going to come out on the 1st of July. Oh, the 1st of July, 1st of June. First episode in June. You're going to hear this one. And then the next episode in June is going to be about my trip to the University of Penn. Sorry about the there, but I'm physically writing my note so that I know that that is what's going to be the next thing up on my list. The University of Penn and how that all went. That was an exciting adventure. And maybe you get through more than that because it was a fun trip, but it was a necessary trip. And boy, enlightening. On that note, I'm going to ring the bell, and main event is over for now. It is time for the Spear of the Week. Now, I know I just mentioned that I was finishing up watching Saturday night's main event here on this May 24th, 2025. And let me tell you, the only person that I would give the Spear of the Week to would be Big Bronson Reed, a giant 330 pound to 350 pound Australian giant who joined Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker to work with Paul Heyman. Without a doubt, those three guys are going to be really difficult to work against in WWE. And with Paul Heyman building what looks to be a new dangerous alliance or a group of Paul Heyman guys, however you want to look at it. Bronson Reed's reemergence after breaking his ankle in the War Games match way back in November definitely deserves the Spear of the Week for his attack on CM Punk. So I have to say that the Spear of the Week is going to go to Bronson Reed, although I personally am not going to volunteer to give him the spear. Yeah, I'll let somebody else do that one. Now, it's time to take that book and get a question. Hmm. 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 A lot of questions that I like. Whew. Oh my goodness. We're gonna have to flip again. Looked at a lot of questions. Oh my goodness. I got a whole show on these questions. Not that I haven't already kind of done that once. Here's a good one. Um, I'm gonna tame it down a little bit. The question is, wait a minute, what's this one about? Hmm. Well, this is one that's better than that. I'll leave that one alone. Here we go. If a genie offered you three wishes, what would you wish for? In parentheses, not more wishes. I can tell you right off the bat, three wishes that I would absolutely want if a genie could give me wishes. The only caveat to this question is you can't wish for more wishes. So the wish that I would ask for first, I'm going to go in reverse order, but you have to do them. You can't do them really in reverse order. It has to literally go one, two, three. You can't do it like that. So the first thing that I would have to wish for would be uh, and I gotta be specific because these wishes sometimes, if they're not specific, can usually backfire on you. I would wish to be pain free, pain free, not unable to feel pain, but to be free of the pain that I have. See how that works? I wouldn't want to be unable to feel pain, but I would like to get rid of the pain that I have right now. There are some things worth more than money. My goodness. I would love to wake up one time, one time, and not have any pain. My goodness. Last time I woke up and had no physical pain was back in 1993 in October. The exact day I can't remember because it was right before I took that cut block, which blew out my knee. That was the last time I woke up with no pain. Every day since, for the last 32 years, I have had pain. That would be cool to not have pain, to just be pain free. Second wish would have to be wisdom. I would wish to have heightened wisdom. Some would say, well, why don't you wish for all the money in the world? Well, if you have heightened wisdom, you will know what to choose and how to do things which would make you as much money as you'll ever need. It'll put you in position to do all the right things. Wisdom, heightened wisdom. So no pain, be able to feel pain free, you have heightened wisdom. And last but not least, hmm, hmm, last wish. Hmm. This one would be for the faithful 49ers. I would wish that they would win 5 straight Super Bowls. Because then they'll have 10 and nobody's ever won 3 in a row. So if they win 5, they would have a very interesting distinction. And all the 49er faithful will enjoy that. And of course, because of the wisdom that I would have acquired, I would probably be able to put myself in position to be part ownership or make enough money where I could see all the games. And it would just be a lot of fun. I think that's what I would do. Pain free, heightened, and enhanced Solomon like wisdom, and the 49ers to win 5 straight Super Bowls. I would be okay with that. I would be very okay with that. Well, I think I may have taken up a lot of your time today, but hopefully you'll allow me to take up some more of it in the future, as in next week. You know where to find me, and I'm going to make sure you do if you forgot. Philip Henderson 5102 on Instagram. Join us. There is always room for one more on the Facebook group, the LIP Facebook group. Join us. Um, I'm out there on Twitter and X, and you can find me out there on, well, not Twitter, it's X. Um, what is that other one? TikTok, somewhere. But most importantly, I don't want to forget to tell everybody that you need to watch Houston's Hustle Hobbies on YouTube. It's just going to make you a smarter person. It just simply will. The things that he thinks about are just, they're unreal. It's great stuff. And then, of course, other friends of the show, the Holmes, Greg and Jessica Holmes. You got to check out their Inside the Homes podcast. You can find it on Spotify, and now they actually have been doing it where you can actually watch them as they do it. It's really cool. I find it really fun. In the last episode that I listened to, they got into that debate, 100 humans, 100 men versus a gorilla. And I look at it this way. I need to answer the question, who would win between 100 humans and a gorilla? Well, I think that if you just had one human, one specific human, you wouldn't need 100 humans. But you would probably need another 99 gorillas if that one human was Chuck Norris. But anyway, you definitely need to check out Inside the Homes on Spotify. But now I'm about to close this show out by letting you know what you're looking at first. This is one of my newer paintings. I call it Clouded Peace. Well, peace sign with some sort of clouding around it. This is a very interesting decision to use this as a background because this is the only painting so far that you see that has been a background for any of my YouTube shows that I'm not entirely sure if it's finished. I don't know. I'm not really sure. All the other ones that I've done were absolutely 100% complete. So, as a distinction, this painting here may not be done. I may tweak it somewhere, somehow. So, if you were to purchase this one when the time comes, just know that if you look at episode 100, 212, no, 211 of Lip, where this painting is featured, it very well may look different than what you buy. Just saying. But now it's time for the words of wisdom. Now, I had said that I was going to go ahead and continue to use the same words until I finished about telling your story, but part of my story is I will not stop. I will never stop. Truly, a man without fear is invincible if you can become without fear. But let's face it, those are very valuable sets of words of wisdom. But I think that really, in truth, the continuation of everyone has a story. Tell it. You never know who needs to hear. Still, the words of wisdom that ring true for this episode. And at least one or two more. Bear with me. The story is coming together, and it's nearly complete. I hope you stick around with me to find out where it all ends up. But as for now, my name is Phil, and you have just listened to The Lip.